risk level. So how do we determine it? This whole concept behind assessments. First, I want to tell you a little bit about assessments from a historical perspective to kind of let you know where we are today. The first generation of assessments were described as these quasi-clinical assessments. They were subjective in nature, and they really had to do with professional judgment, intuition, and gut feeling. All right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard officers who have been around as long as I have and say to me, I don't need no stinking assessment. I've been around here a long time and I know better than what that can tell me. Okay? You still hear that. Well, guess what? You know, the research around that will say that the likelihood of them getting it right the majority of the time is pretty poor. Even though there's value in gut feeling, and I'll talk about the value in professional judgment, the research continues to say why it's so important that we use formal assessments. The second generation of formal assessments began to look at this empirically based risk assessment idea. They began development in the 1920s. Can you believe that? That's how long these assessment instruments have been around. But they primarily looked at those static factors. They really didn't look at those dynamic factors. They just looked at the static factors. And so there were still lots of flaws around the second generation. We did this in the last presentation as well, but I kind of bring you back to this whole idea behind if you just look at static factors, think about diabetes. How well will we predict the probability of diabetes if I just look at whether my mom had it or whether my parents had it, and I don't look at the dynamic factors? If I don't take into account the things that are controllable. So again, this idea behind static factors are those factors that are related to risk that do not change. Some examples are prior offenses, gender, age. Dynamic factors are related to risk and can change. Things like unemployment, school, alcohol and drugs, things to that nature. Directly correlated to risk but can be changed. Dynamic factors are also called criminogenic risk. Changing these factors changes the probability of recidivism. When I address those risk factors, I reduce the probability of recidivism. It provides for the basis of developing a case plan. Remember that treatment plan that we do on the medical side? Well, our case plan is, what are we going to do to make sure you don't come back here again? Our case management, our case plan. And as I said, when we address those factors, we in fact increase the probability of public safety. When we look at those top 8, there's only one that's a static factor. Only that prior and current offenses. Now, even though it's a very strong static factor, matter of fact, right up there at the number 1 predictor of recidivism, it is a static factor. And so what's important for you as a takeaway is, again, I'm not suggesting don't take high-risk kids. I'm just suggesting know who you're taking. The sooner the kid gets into the system, they're higher probability. Don't say don't take them. Just say know who you're taking. Know who you're taking.
So are you saying that those predictive domains are in order of their importance on the slide?
Well, and that's a good question. The question was, are they in order of importance on the slide? They're not in order of importance on the slide, but I think that there's one distinguishing factor about this. There are some things that, as I said, the top 4, as an example, going back again about, I'll use the diabetic analogy again. If my mom has it, my probability goes up. My mom and dad have it, my probability goes up even higher. Okay? That's like saying, with these top 4 in particular, that's like saying if I have prior criminal record, my risk goes up. If I have attitudes and orientations, my risk goes up even further. If I have peers, it goes up even further. So added together elevates this risk significantly. And then I go to these next four, and while they are all factors, it's kind of like I have my mom, but I don't eat well. It's causation, but may not be as great a causation. Make sense? Directly correlated, just not as strong as predictor. Still stronger than any of the others. And I say that, and I really say that with hesitation, because that's not to suggest, I don't in any one shape or form suggest don't do these, because they clearly say, these are the top 8, pay attention to these top 8.
So, what's that YSL or whatever? What other quick assessments do you have? Because we don't have time to do it.
I think you'll have to come to the next session. It's like, this is just a preview. But at the next session, they'll be talking more extensively about the variety of instruments that they have and what you can use for what purpose. So, or I can talk to you afterwards. The third generation of instruments include both static and dynamic. They accept the necessity of delivering rehabilitative services in order to enhance public safety. So in other words, regardless of the instrument, and that's the bottom line of this, you want an instrument that assesses both of those, static and dynamic. Those are the best instruments that you can give. Does it have to be the YLS? No. But I put the YLS up here because, as I said earlier, it's one of the most researched ones that's available. Well, we haven't gone to the condensed version of it. But is the wireless condensed from its original version? Yes. Even there's the original, I think, had like 53 questions, and they're down to in the 30s or something of that nature. So they're even getting better based on the research to kind of condense it. Knowing here's the other thing that I would say in terms of that, and again, I have to speak about the difference between ideal and real. Because I go back and I say, I was the chief in Omaha. Reality was much different than ideal. When we had caseloads that officers were 300 plus, sometimes ideal was just not achievable. So you have to deal in the real world. So I want to talk about ideal for a second. I just would encourage you or challenge you to say, you know what? When I say to myself, and Tina, this is like no offense to you, okay, so I want to preface that. When I say to myself, I don't have time, I really challenge you to think about an investment in an assessment will save you time in violations. Will save you time in having that kid come back through your door or the justice door or whatever. So I just challenge you not to get so caught up in the task of the day to forget what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and that's to be the best possible program that you can. I realize that that's the ideal, and that all of you have a very real, you may say, I can't afford the YLS. I can't afford to do the YLS. We can't pay for it. We don't have any money to pay for it. That's real. And so when you are faced with challenges like that, what I want you to know is how to get the best possible program you can get in your world. And what do you need to know in order to get there? What do you need to know? You need to know that the assessment that you have has to look at both of those dynamics. In probation, we couldn't afford to do the LSCMI on the adults every single time. We created our own instrument. Had to have it validated, but to help us save time and save energy on a certain population of offenders. So there are ways to do it. Lots of agencies have created their own. Join up with UNO and work together.